Peace, everybody, and welcome to my channel. Thank you for clicking on this video. So the question before us today is, how can we help people? We look around the world or even just around our country, and we see that there's lack and people are suffering. Yes, it's true that many people are rich, but the gap, the wealth gap between the rich and the poor just keeps increasing and increasing. The super rich have so much more money than the average person. It's ridiculous. When you look at land, we see that a recent study found that only about 26% of homeowners actually have their homes paid off. Now, yeah, you look at the numbers like, oh yeah, this was 2015. And they say that about 60% of people own their own homes. Well, that's not actually true until you pay off the mortgage. Alright? Which is interesting whenever you think about the fact that the Homestead Act of 1862, it started out as just 160 acres, I believe, but there were, I believe it was the Kincaid Amendment that allowed for entire quarter sections to be obtained free and clear for people who homesteaded these huge farms out in I think it was either Nebraska or Oregon or somewhere. 640 acres for free just for going to the land and building a little cabin and running a farm. I mean, yeah, a farm is a lot of work. I mean, I grew up on a farm, but I'm just saying, like, 640 acres to one family just because they went out there and, like, became farmers. And then you look at today, and it's like, you know, if, you know, let's just take the 60% number. Like, let's say 60% of people are working towards owning their own home, but at the same time, that means that 40% of people are renting, but it's probably a much higher number than that. Whenever you're forced into a situation where you have to rent, that just increases the wage gap even more. And then we couple that with the fact that we know that the federal government has been buying up land from the states, and that currently the federal government owns some 640 million acres of land in the country, which contains about 2.3 billion acres in the United States, 1.9 billion of which are in the lower 48. So you kind of exclude the Alaskan tundra, but you know, the government owns like 60% of Alaska too. So but it's really interesting and infuriating, in my opinion, to think about, because there's a monopoly on land. There's another statistic that says that 3% of all private landowners own 97% of all the privately held land. Okay? So now we're going to shift a little bit and talk about what people have been referring to as a UBI, a universal basic income. Now, I believe that is a potentially good idea, but I think that I have a better idea. Because and you don't have to be left or right to support a UBI. Like, it's, you know, people on the right think that it's just a socialist thing, but my idea though is for a universal basic, um, basically basic necessities (UBN), and the first difference that we will note is that a UBN is different from just a cash handout. Whereas, if you set it up cash handout, pretty much even people that already have money would be signing up for the universal basic income. They would be turning that around and like investing it in something, or doing whatever they wanted with it. But if you offer goods, canned food, water, power, and in my opinion, a little quarter piece of land for families, then you've got a good recipe for success, and not just success in a general sense, but you will free up the minds of the time and the minds of people. They'll be able to follow their dreams so much more. We've had the assembly line since Henry Ford, and ever since the days of mass production, we've been in a position to free up the entire country from having to work. See, it's this whole thing about choice, freedom, as opposed to an obligation. And the way that it stands now, you're literally obligated to have to work just to earn enough money to put food in your mouth so you don't starve to death, to stay legal so you're not like arrested for being homeless in a park somewhere, and and not hit by the government with fees for not having enough money to buy the health insurance that they say that you have to have, just to be legal. And that's not right. There needs to be choice, and if you make it so that people don't have to work to have necessities, it's a good thing, because as long as you keep those necessities as a corner of the market, I'm not suggesting that the government should subsidize smartphones for everybody. That's not the idea. The idea is just that our means of production are so efficient, the government, companies are forced to throw away food by the ton that they can't even sell fast enough. A little case in point, I went to the grocery store earlier today, and everybody does this. You look for the gallon of milk that has the new, that's not going to expire, and so you end up with milk that's about to expire, and nobody ends up buying it because they just get the carton that's right behind that's 10, sometimes even 2 weeks newer than the one that nobody bought, and then they end up having to throw that milk away. But it's just the point that that not being obligated to work, yeah, it's going to take away some money from the super rich. That's true, but it would also universal basic necessities, including basic land, basic food, canned food, crappy food. You don't want it to be filet mignon. You want it to be food that has nutritional value, but that people aren't necessarily going to be satisfied with. It will be sustenance, but it's still going to be something that people are going to be like, hey, I wish I didn't have to eat this crap. You see what I'm saying? And I further attempt to enhance this idea with with something called, and I had never heard of this before. Like, I came up with it. I came up with a dual monetary system on my own, and then I searched Google and realized, because I mean, I hadn't searched it before, and I was like, okay, I better search dual monetary system before, making this video. And I saw that Cuba has one. Maybe I heard about it indirectly and forgot about it, but as far as I'm concerned, like, I had this idea that, because this is where I was coming from with, like, this isn't the Cuba thing, because Cuba had a dual monetary system made in 1994, and one of their currencies was interchangeable with the dollar. But in this case, what we're thinking about is a dual monetary system that will facilitate a stabilized system that supports a universal basic necessities, basic food, basic water, basic land, and basic electricity. And so what you do is you have a second type of currency, and you set it such that one, let's call it the Watson, like one Watson is strictly greater than the value of $1. And if you do that, and if you make it such that the people who work in the quote-unquote necessity sector are paid in Watsons, then you guarantee that people who work in a given sector, say it's food, like filet mignon is more expensive than canned food, that's true. People will still want to work in high-end restaurants and will get paid well, but with the dual monetary system, you combat the argument that people are going to make about, oh, you're gonna have like slave labor to be the people who are working for free, handing out all the free stuff to everybody. No. Pay them better. Let the currency fluctuate on the market. It won't be static, but you just set it as strictly greater than. The W is strictly greater than the dollar. And when you do that, and you keep that necessity sector purposefully small, as, sort of like the idea of limited government. You don't want the government to be any bigger than it has to be. It's the same thing with universal basic necessities. You don't want to offer any more than is absolutely necessary for survival of every single United States citizen who was born in this country to American parents. And I think that if a system like this is implemented, then we could really prosper. Again, just think about people having the option, everyone having the same option. See, look at this. People can get food stamps, but you have to be poor. You can apply for unemployment, but you have to be unemployed. There's all these social programs and whatnot, but they're discriminatory. And I say that if you offer anything, it should be offered universally. And again, the people who don't need it are going to be the same ones who aren't taking it. Or if they don't need it and they just want it, then, whatever. Like, you have to offer things universally, and again, make them shitty, or at least, like, not something that you would necessarily want to live on the rest of your life. I mean, you could, but why would you want to if you had any sense of drive or motivation to succeed? And in fact, people will, because people are afraid that if you just offer a bunch of free stuff, then there's not going to be any incentive for people to work and innovate and compete. But again, it's like the minimal government concept. You keep it small, and you allow for people to everyone universally to access basic necessities, including land, because you can't live on water. You're not Jesus. You're not going to like stand on the water your whole life fasting, standing there on the water like waving at everybody like, ha ha, silly people. No, you need land, and that's one of the big things that's been like sort of overlooked and, in my opinion, covered up. The fact that fewer and fewer people are landowners. And in fact, if you do a Google search, you're not going to find very many statistics on the number of people in this country that own land. You'll find it all in terms of class warfare, social, ethnic warfare. Oh, fewer blacks own land. Yeah, that's true. And the rich own most of the land. Yeah, that's true too. But just look at the raw number. Just look at the raw number of people out of the total population, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, whatever, that actually own land, and you will begin to get upset, I think, at the fact that the government is hoarding 26% of all the land in the country, and like 60% of people are renters, lifelong renters, if you divide, well, obviously, like, there's mountaintops and part of the land mass is water, so you will have to subtract a little bit, but if you just take 1.9 billion divided by 300 million, it comes out to like 7.5 acres per person. But, an acre's 43,560 square feet. That's a lot. And people can basically live on just the tiniest little, like 1/16 of an acre, little piece of land. And if you just like had a free and clear 1/8, 1/16 to like every individual or family, together with like ingress and egress to their property, and not as an investment property, but as a homestead, that could work. And you could also incentivize the creation of families by doing something like this, where you could say that for every married couple, and this doesn't have to be heterosexual, like any two adults that have been married for 5 years and have at least one child, either biological or adopted, should be eligible for a larger homestead stipend or grant or whatever. So they would be getting, like, say 10 acres as opposed to just a little teeny tiny piece of land. And that would incentivize people to start rebuilding families in the country. And we all know how important that is in the fight against the family. And so yeah, it's this is just a presentation of some ideas. I don't claim to have all the answers. I'm just offering some ideas. I presented, universal basic necessities as opposed to universal basic income, which is a monetary handout. And again, like, even just on the face of it, offering goods or services, people are just automatically, you know that people are going to be less likely to go for those types of handouts as opposed to people going for money. Because pretty much, again, you could say across the board that if you offer free money universally, even people who don't need it are going to take it. But if you offer canned foods across the board, while people are, eating filet mignon every night. Those people probably aren't going to be the ones going to go get those canned foods, and pretty much the same people who are already getting the canned foods are going to be still getting them, but yet a few people more. Like me, I've never been on any food stamps or anything, but I can tell you right now, if they were available, I'd be going down there and stocking up on them, because and again, it's not about wanting to be lazy. That's a false argument. It's about freeing up people's minds. Think about it, like all the creative thinkers. I mean, it's similar to the Einstein's like busy working at a pizza franchise and can't even make enough money to pay off credit cards or put money back in savings, and production is automated. There should be ways that this could be pulled off. And again, the ideal scenario is you have the pyramid structure. I'm not saying dissolve the power scheme of the smart people being the ones who succeed more often than people who aren't as intelligent or talented, but at the same time, you don't want to have a situation in which the bottom of the pyramid, which is where most of the people are, you don't want to upset those people. Like, we're not slaves, okay? And we shouldn't be treated like slaves. As much as people can be freed up to make their own choices and to follow their own dreams, that should be pursued, within reason. And I think that it is. I think that I've made some points, I've given some options, and I hope that we can start an open discussion about these things, and about UBI isn't the only option. There, skip the money. The money's fake anyway. Give us the goods, give us the services, but don't go crazy. Free people up. Introduce a dual monetary system that gives people more money, that work in that sector, or just skip the dual monetary system. Just automatically say that people that work in necessity sector should be paid more. I mean, and you will attract people to that sector, and where the food is there. The food isn't the problem. The land is there. It's not a problem of a lack of resources. It's a problem of governmental structure, and a lack of will and understanding. Because again, you mentioned something like UBI, and like people automatically think you're like a socialist or something, but I'm really pretty much done with labels. I mean, you could call me whatever you want. I mean, I'm not really about just like spilling the beans on everything that I believe all at once, but I'm telling you some ideas, and I expect to get some reasonable, logical, constructive feedback and criticism. Thank you, and peace.